Hello and welcome to Season 2 of What I Did Next from ANT Media. I'm Malak Fuad, your host. As you might know from Season 1, What I Did Next revolves around people's personal and professional crossroads and looks at those trajectories from key pivot points. My guests are multilingual, multicultural with roots in the Middle East. They are engaged, curious and passionate about knowledge and strive to make a difference in the world. For Season 2, we'll be dropping episodes every Monday, so stay tuned. Today I'm delighted to welcome two very talented sisters, Fatma Ghaly and Amina Ghaly. This duo are the driving force behind the luxury jewelry brand Azza Fahmy, started by their mother. The sisters have been instrumental in taking the firm from a local Egyptian niche company to a luxury international brand with 19 retail doors across the Middle East, as well as in London and Washington, D.C. Employing over 280 employees, the company has also built a strong online presence. Fatma and Amina share a natural and comfortable intimacy together and come across as passionate and dedicated leaders of a much-beloved brand. They each bring innovative techniques to their respective roles and provide a compelling narrative about what it means to be strong Egyptian women. We're kicking off the season with one of the show's staple questions. I asked each of them about their ideal dinner party guests, the people they'd like to sit across a table with, and I got some pretty great answers. We kick off the show with Amina's answers.
I would love to invite Kulthum. I think I just want to be in the presence of greatness and just to see what it feels like. Second person would be Shams Tabrizi. Again, just to see the light and perhaps have a few very deep conversations.
He's kind of mysterious though, isn't he?
Yes.
We know him through Rumi, but we don't know him very much.
And I read a few things for him, and for sure I was confused actually whether I would have Rumi or him, and then I decided that he would be much more mystical and mysterious to have a conversation with. Third person would actually be Miriam Haskell. She's one of my all-time favorite jewelry designers from the mid-50s. She was a pioneer when it came to costume jewelry. Fourth person would actually be Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO of PepsiCo. I think she's one of the ladies that definitely had seemed to have a very nice work-life balance. And the fifth person was Robin Williams.
Robin Williams, the actor, the comedian.
Yeah, I thought the dinner would be very intense.
You need to lighten it up.
And I think a bit of humor and just someone who's going to lighten up the whole dinner and make the conversation flow and some sort of comic.
But he had a very dark side too.
For sure. But I want the light side that's just going to make everything flow and make everything seem like it's simple.
I loved him. He was wonderful. Yeah.
So that is my
interesting
dinner list.
Tab Fatma, would there be any overlap with Amina's guests?
Definitely Kulthum is an overlap. My four other guests are very different.
Really? Who do you have?
I have Machiavelli.
Wow.
He's someone, I've studied Renaissance art history, and he's someone that's, I believe, is greatly misunderstood and a very interesting character, and I think very complex character that I would like to have a conversation with. From that same era, Leonardo da Vinci. I'm fascinated with the concept of the Renaissance man that was not just one thing, but a sculptor, a poet, a scientist, an architect. And how do you do that? How do you have all these dimensions?
Yeah, it's impressive.
It's like living life to the fullest.
And he appeals to scientists, engineers, art lovers. He appeals to a whole range of people.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Hatshepsut. Just to see that woman who ruled for over 2 decades back then, and what type of character that is like.
No one living?
No one you know? No one you currently know, huh? Neither of you have...
No, I
have Indra Nooyi.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Like, it's such an opportunity when you're given the option to meet people that were not are not alive. So I felt like, because I thought about it, like there are people that are living or people that I'd like to meet, but I was like, I prioritized. My others are footballers, so I was like, my fifth one, I didn't choose the footballer, but if I choose people alive...
Why didn't you?
Because another person I'd really like to meet is Muhammad Ali.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Why?
Because again, a very complex character, someone that changed a country completely, someone that's a visionary but also not so
He
straightforward.
doesn't know how to read and write, Fayani. It's incredible.
didn't?
Yeah, I think
Eh?
I don't think he knew how to read and write.
He was
was
a soldier.
illiterate.
He was
He
an
was a
Albanian
soldier.
soldier. That في الآخر
Oh,
هو-
sorry. That Muhammad Ali.
not the boxer.
Muhammad Ali of Egypt.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
For me, it was. But my other lists are footballers. So
Fatma, I think you need Robin Williams also. Because
Yeah.
that's
I think you should merge your dinner parties.
and I can bring my footballers in, and it becomes a lighter.
thinking Leonardo da Vinci وماكيافيلي ومحمد يعني I feel like these guys are gonna have يعني and this is why I actually I was like I need someone to lighten all this conversation.
But it's interesting. I like that you neither of you went for only artistic or only business related. It's a real mix.
I wonder though if we do have a dinner like that, would it be an interesting dinner or would they just يعني would they just be so يعني I can so vision like Shams Tabrizi just saying what am I doing here and Kalsoom like fidgeting
Absolutely.
like what am I in.
It's basically just, the idea is that who are the people you want to meet? Regardless of whether they match each other or whether it's a dinner, it's just who is on your wish list, That's the idea. Mine was very eclectic also, so it's an interesting one.
And I think I got Robin Williams just to lighten up the dinner بس يعني.
So, second question, I'll start with Fatma this time. If you could pick one book, one film, or one piece of music that mattered to you, that impacted you, that reminds you of a period in your life, what would you choose?
The hardest for me was the one piece of music because I couldn't pick one piece of music. I'm very, very. I don't want to say moody, but like there are different pieces for different times. Definitely, some of Kalsoom's songs are top of the list for me, but also Dire Straits. So it was very difficult for me to choose one piece of music. The film was easy. It's The Godfather.
That was my favorite as well.
For me, it's a no-brainer.
Is it the first one or the whole trilogy?
The first and the second.
And the second, okay. What about the film?
Again, it's so layered, and it's one of those movies that you watch over. I think I must have watched it over 30 times. You don't get bored. It doesn't get old. The book, it was I couldn't choose between two. One of them is 100 Years of Solitude. Again, for me, it's like The Godfather. So many layers, so many, and the whole sort of play between fantasy and yet how real the emotions are and how, it's amazing. I find it fascinating how he writes. And the other one is أولاد حارتنا.
And you, Amina?
And my answers now are going to be very lame because I'm just going to repeat everything she said. So with the music, it's very, very challenging for me. Like Fatma mentioned earlier, it's mood. So if I'm working, it has to be classical music. I cannot work to anything else.
Because there's no lyrics?
Yes.
Because it's just background?
And something about how I feel. I tend to wave a lot and move my hands a lot when I'm thinking of design. And I think the classical music, how it goes up and goes down, allows me to actually do the movement in my head.
Interesting.
Certain times it's only Kalsoom. And then I love to dance. So if I'm not feeling well or I feel like I need an uplift, it will be just dance music, whatever dance music entails, and I'll just blast it. And again, it will be a favorite moment. With movies, again, very challenging because I am a bit of a movie buff. Godfather definitely made top of the list for all the reasons that Fatma had stated, but also not just the characters and the family values, but the music, the perfection, the scenario, the scenes, and every time you think you're done watching it, and then you find out how Marlon Brando was hired to the movie, and then how Al Pacino was hired to, and then it drops another layer and another depth to the movie entirely. But I also am a huge fan of Guns of Navarone.
Wow, that's a classic.
Huge fan.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, it's World War II, and they're in Navarone. It's in Greece, and the Germans have taken over. And it's basically the British intelligence hires these 6 or 7 officers to go and bomb the guns in Navarone. But it's timeless.
It's unusual for someone of our generation to pick a movie that's so old.
Yani, my father made me watch all these movies since I was 4. I grew up watching all these war movies that fascinated me.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And all the mafia movies,
Yeah.
obviously. And there's so many. And
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
sit here and list endless. Books, I'd say 2. Both are actually in Arabic. I was surprised myself. أولاد حارتنا, or Children of Our Alley, definitely for Naguib Mahfouz. And يوم غائم في البر الغربي لمحمد منسي أنزيل. Again, it's I love how he puts so he starts off in the 1920s, and he's talking about this historical period in Egypt with fiction, with a character, but everything historical. It's the discovery of Tutankhamun's Howard Carter. And then he goes back to Tutankhamun's period with Akhenaten, and he just, again, it's all history, but through fiction.
And is it done in flashbacks or is it separate? Oh, it is.
But it's so good. He just keeps going back and forth, and the way and I like a bit of history, but I don't want facts and dates, and it's just so nice to integrate our history in a novel.
Yeah, yeah. And I think when you integrate history in a fiction format, it captures the imagination in a way that nonfiction can never do.
And the dates and the timelines and the period never leave your mind. And today I feel like I know so much about that period because khalas, it's so linked to the characters versus when you sit and you have to learn.
While Fatma is the company's CEO, Amina is head of design. Each occupy 2 pillar roles at the company and work hand in hand to ensure their mother's philosophy and aesthetic are moved forward for a new generation of customers.
My mother was graduated from the Faculty of Fine Arts, studies interior decoration. That was in the early 60s. If you can imagine being in Egypt in the early 60s, there wasn't the current scene of entrepreneurship and private businesses, and you either had a government job, which was very safe and secure, or you had some sort of family business that you're going to be a part of. And so she joined, actually, I think it was the Ministry of Information back then, where she used to design children's covers, book covers. And she always says, I was never too passionate about what I did, and she's a very passionate person. And so she tried very different things. So she'd go into and take courses in ceramics and try ceramics. She tried interior design, and that was her degree. And she tried different things. And then I think that was a major pivot in her life, where one day she goes to the book fair, the Cairo Book Fair, and she comes across this book about medieval jewelry in German. She didn't speak a word of German, but it's like, she's like, I saw it and it's like I was hypnotized. It's like, and the book was, I think was almost all of her salary.
She always talks about how she felt rather than the content of the book. She always says, my heart was pounding so hard. And she always calls it like it was a moment of destiny. She knew right then, right there, that this is what she's meant to do.
I'm always fascinated when people say things like that, because I've never had that.
I've had it.
You've had it, Amina? Tell me about that.
So, because my mother was a single mother, so she used to pretty much take Fatma and I everywhere, including exhibitions. So when we were little girls, we would just travel with her everywhere in the world and help her set up and sell and everything. And she sat us down, Fatma and I, and she said, do you want this business? Because I am happy just to remain at the same size as I am. We don't need to continue it. I think at the time I must have been 13, Fatma 16 or something like that. And I remember both of us looking at her like, what are you talking about? Of course we want this business. So we knew we were getting there. So even though I had a very artistic side and I kind of knew that I wanted to do this, but there wasn't any assurance. You're just fantasizing about a dream. I remember incidents where Fatma and I would be walking in London, and I must have been 10, and I would tell her something like, oh, we're going to open a shop here one day. I have no idea where I'm getting that information, but it's like, oh, we're going to open a shop here one day. And I decided to pursue this path. At the time, I didn't understand it was passion from an educational side. So I went to Italy, to Florence, and I was in this tiny little contemporary jewelry school. And I sat there, I'm 17 years old, and I'm piercing out my first brass ring. It was a shape of a crown. And I remember my heart pounding so much. And you know when you say, this is it, this is it. And I remember leaving the saw that I was holding. At the time, they were calling cards. There was no such thing as you just, call international. So I got a calling card, which was very challenging in Italy. And I called my mother up and I'm screaming outside school, this is exactly what I need to do. This is exactly what I want to do. And she's like, no, do other stuff as well. I don't want to push you. And I actually did one more year of everything, fine art, pottery, fashion, photography, but to be sure. But it was that moment in school that it was like, this is it.
And you hadn't put your hand to jewelry making before in Cairo with your mother with her work?
We did, but it was when I took it professionally, that's when it really hit me.
Wow.
Because we used to work with her in the workshop in summer, but for us it was, why are we here when all our friends are somewhere else?
You were being forced into it.
Exactly.
Yeah, very much so.
But with this, it was definitely a moment of faith.
Amazing. So let's go back to the book.
If you can imagine Egypt in the early 60s, it wasn't so easy to study jewelry making. And
or to think out of the box.
For sure.
Yeah.
And that meant that you had to go to Ghaly, which is the jewelry quarters back then and still is, and go to one of the masters and ask him to sort of teach her, which was for sure unheard of and unacceptable for a girl who's a college graduate to go work in a workshop.
Was your mother already married? Were you already born at this point?
No. She wasn't married. She was living with my grandmother, who's very conservative. But she's like, it was like a train on its train track. She's like, nothing was going to stop me. And she's like, I haven't stopped since then.
It's amazing.
Just going back a bit earlier, she had lost her father at the age of 12. And they were living very comfortably before that. And then suddenly they had a lot of financial strain. My grandmother had to provide for 4 kids. And so she had to keep her day job. Yeah. So she would finish her day job and then go to Ghaly in the evening, walking, because she was saving on the bus ride. And she'd stay there and she'd say, I'd put my head on the bench, and she's like, I'd lift my head and it'd be 1 a.m.
Yeah. And she would go and tell her aunts, one day I'm going to be very famous. One day you're going to see my name in the paper.
That's amazing. And did they? Were they around when that happened?
I think it took my grandmother quite a bit of time to accept that my mother did that. And I remember for my mom, one of her pivoting moments when they were watching a television interview with my grandmother was still alive. And she looked at my mom and she told her, you did good, Susan.
That's really sweet.
It was like a very...
very emotional moment. As far as a consumer and as someone who's seen the brand over the years, from what I gather, she seemed to be the first to be inspired by pharaonic, Islamic, and incorporate it into the work.
Maybe she's the first here.
In
she's
Egypt.
Not the first on an internet. If you think of all the big brands, definitely the discovery of Tutankhamun really set
impacted the whole.
Actually, it's just she got inspired by everything. And like Fatma was saying, it wasn't about either the designer jewelry at the time, which only a very small percentage could afford, if you could afford the big brands, or you got an Italian, French, English version of it, or you were doing weight by grams. Either way, we didn't fit in. And honestly, we didn't fit in for a very, very long time. It took decades to convince people that we're charging for the design and research and effort and technicalities and craftsmanship, and we're not charging
Because it weighs so much.
Exactly. And it was the case really up until 10, 15 years ago. We'd still have people come in and say, oh, well, how many grams of gold is that? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm happy to share with you, but it's not the point.
Yeah.
It's like buying a painting.
Exactly, but it's a different mindset. People had to adjust to that.
And it was a very different mindset here. Until today, Malak, the majority of the jewelry industry is what you call unbranded jewelry.
Yes.
Which is sold by grams.
Yes.
So up
Even
until, I
worldwide.
think, the latest McKinsey study, I think it was up until a couple of years ago, 80% of the market worldwide is the unbranded by gram. So it is a foreign concept everywhere.
This was the 70s when she was developing her skill.
Yes, and then I think what happened, another moment, was she realized that she got to a point where her master couldn't offer her anymore. And she says, my head became much more advanced than my hand. And he couldn't give me that next design-wise, not
skill-wise.
Not skill-wise. So her sort of what she wanted to create in terms of design could not be fulfilled anymore by what he was teaching her. And luckily, or not luck, because I don't think it's all planned somehow. She was very, very good friends then with the guy that was running the British Council and his wife. And he said, Azza, you're a perfect fit for a scholarship to go to the UK and study jewelry. And so she got a scholarship to go to the UK. And again, because she was so passionate and so crazy about it, she ended up doing a 2-year program in 6 months.
That was it propelled her into another dimensional. Yeah. And what did she do when she returned?
I think she opened her first workshop, and she says, like, my first exhibition before opening her workshop, where I think her salary was £3, and she got silver with it, and she did 5 rings, and her friends bought them for £15, and then she put the £15 and bought raw material, and
Her first real exhibition, she sold for £1,000, and she had claimed then that she had already was a millionaire. She was like, done, I'm done.
It exceeded her expectations,
Completely.
Right? Yeah.
Completely. The capital of Azza Fahmy Jewelry was £3.
So she carried on. She was by then married. You were both born, and she divorced when you were both very young. Is that right?
I want to say officially I was 6 and you were 9, but I think we moved out earlier.
I'm fascinated when I hear stories of women who are juggling all these things. She's juggling a burgeoning career in an environment that is not receptive to women.
Well,
in Egypt.
Mind you, Malak, the jewelry industry worldwide is a male-dominated industry.
Yes.
It's not just in Egypt.
Not
if
just
you think
Egypt.
of all the brands, they're all men. Because it was very linked to craftsmanship, and craftsmanship was linked to men.
very few jewelry designers in the world are women. How many brands can you name? The
Worldwide.
names,
That's right.
that are founded or led by women.
And I think I can name 6 worldwide.
So that makes it even more groundbreaking, actually, because she, it wasn't just an Arab or an Egypt-centric thing. It's a worldwide thing. But again, going back to the idea of single mother raising 2 young children, 2 young women, actually, which is also significant, in Egypt. Even today, being a single mother is hard, but in the mid 80s, it must have been very difficult.
I think for my mother, if you ask her, and I think it's with us, it's the same. We never knew, gender was never an issue for us, because we came from a very strong matriarch family that didn't teach us that because you're a woman, you weren't allowed to do. We really had so much freedom and so much limitlessness. To her, she didn't see that her being a woman meant that she was unable to do. We would have the exact same challenges today as a business if we were men. I don't walk into a room and feel like, oh, I'm a woman, I must do twice as hard to earn their respect. I've never felt that. I don't know, Fatma, I've never felt that. I think the challenge comes, like you say, when now you're juggling with 2 little girls, and now you have a brand new responsibility, these girls that need a lot of love, attention, everything that you need to do. I think that's where the challenge came in as gender.
Yeah, and I think there must have been moments when she questioned it all and must have thought, at some point very low. It must have been quite lonely for her, because dealing with 2 children on your own is hard in the best of circumstances. And then you're in this business where you're starting it, and it's at the time, even then, groundbreaking.
My mother built a wonderful support system around her. فإحنا we grew up also with a very strong support system. So it wasn't that she was, I want to do it all and I want to do it alone. She got, يعني, we were happy to hang around my aunt or I don't know what, or there wasn't the super overpowering, I need to control all the narratives, and I think it's the only way it could have worked.
And that's healthy, because as relationships between all of you, that's the only way it could have worked. So did you spend as much time as you could around the business, in the workshop? Was it a natural place for you both to spend your time?
Definitely. And I remember days on end being at Lain Gallery where, I just get £1 a day for sweeping or...
How cute.
Very young. And then in the summers, like Amina was saying, we'd go to the workshop and we'd bead necklaces, or we'd go with my mother to London if she had an exhibition, or went to China with her, like,
Everywhere.
We just went everywhere.
She used to call us her assistants.
And now you're both very clearly embedded in the firm. Was there a point, I mean, Amina, I think, said that she had an epiphany moment where she realized this is what she wanted. What about for you, Fatma? Was there a point where you considered other kinds of careers?
Anna, for me, it wasn't like Amina at all. Actually, I ended up joining the business very... I don't want to say coincidentally, but in an unplanned way, where I was actually, I thought I'd be in design. So I never thought, again, I had a very strong creative side. And I had decided not to travel. I didn't want to travel. My mother wanted me to go to the UK, and I said, no, I'd rather stay here at the beginning and maybe go later.
You mean at the university age?
And so I went to the Faculty of Fine Arts. And then very quickly after joining, I realized I had a lot of time on my hand. And I wasn't stimulated or challenged. So my mother was like, okay, why don't you, we're in this, you need to finish it. Why don't you come work part-time? And so I started working part-time, and I found myself being drawn to the commercial side of things.
Which you probably were not expecting.
At all. So the whole thing was unplanned. So I started working sort of things were not that structured at the time. So my mother was very much, it was still a one-woman show in the sense of she was very involved in all aspects of the business. I think we must have been around a team of 20, 25 back then. And so I sort of would do a bit of sales, and then a bit of PR, and then a bit of marketing, and then, and then I realized I got more and more involved and ended up spending much less time at college.
But so for you, just as an individual, you had a pivot at the time where you were in the Faculty of Fine Arts, thinking you'd have a path in the design world, and then you moved into a commercial role.
Unknowingly. Like, when something happens very, very slowly.
I mean, I think Amina's story is more unique.
Yes.
I don't know many people who have that aha moment.
I discovered that I was, like, my story is unique about 10 years ago, because I always thought, like,
that's what happens to everyone.
That's what happens to everyone. It's, you sit with someone and they're in their early 30s and they're like, we don't know what we want to do. And my question is, how? What do you mean you don't know what you want to do?
And the fact that you were so young, it's such a blessing.
Actually,
when you know.
Something I don't share often, I knew when I was really 7.
Really? You felt it?
I felt it, and I would sign my birthday cards. It's a very famous brand, but I would say future so-and-so.
Yeah.
I have many birthday cards signed.
You knew it then.
When I was 7, and no brainer, I'm going to be huge. What are you guys talking about?
So when you would watch your mother as a child drawing a piece of jewelry or designing something, would you get in there and say, Mommy, I think you should do it like this?
At all.
No, you didn't.
No, I would sit and draw, but actually I wasn't drawn to drawing jewelry. I just was drawn to art in general. I would love to draw. I would love to design fashion. I was very drawn to anything artistic. But it was the feeling that I got more than how it will actually come. Right. Like I said, when we would walk around with Fatma in London and I would tell her something silly like, we're going to open a shop here. I don't know where I get these statements, but it's just, it's a feeling.
The end result It's like the end result was the feeling you felt,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the process necessarily
At all.
itself. Yeah,
At all. It was
And
just,
I think all of us are somehow this way, which is very strange. Like, you know, the whole trend with vision boards and stuff. I think it just came naturally to us. I remember when I was a junior in the marketing department, and a colleague of mine, who's now our PR director, and we had to present to the general manager then a presentation about marketing and sort of a 3-year plan. I remember what we did is the cover of the presentation was sort of, we photoshopped Aza Fahmy on the cover of Vogue, and back then in Dubai. And within a year, both things happened.
Both things happened.
But like, we didn't even say how in the presentation. Do you know what I mean? It was sort of, we see ourselves in Vogue and we see ourselves opening
even
in Dubai.
I think with Matthew Williamson, I think he did a collaboration with H&M.
أيوة صح.
And I loved his collaboration with H&M, and I would say something silly like, one day we're gonna work with him. And I remember the first time we got an email that we're gonna work with him, our reaction, me, Fatma, and the PR directors, is that we just chose not to read the email.
As if you read it, it wouldn't happen.
And I remember that day, because all of us sat beside each other and said, "Did you get the email?" I got the email, but I couldn't read the email.
That's so funny.
We'll read it tomorrow.
That's really funny.
But it was like, it was the same with so many things. We would just say random stuff.
And then suddenly it
But I think it's like the conversation my mother had with her aunts, where one day I'm going to be in the papers and be famous. It's sort of having that vision where you know where you're going to get to, you don't know how right now, but it's happened to us so many times, Malak, in
But that's
plans.
so important, Fatma, because you, as you said, your mother went through very difficult times when she was building the business. But having that in your head, that end result, knowing this is where I will be, allows you to go through those difficult moments and think, I'll just keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly sort of the point, because even after that, we've had a lot of difficult times. I mean, with the revolution, with the devaluation of the pound, with the pandemic, and everything sort of hit right after one another. And we're a growing company, so we're doing a lot of investments in growth, and it's that.
Yes.
It's sort of,
It all
it's
came
okay,
together at
it's tough now,
Yes.
we're under a lot of pressure now, but this will pass.
Yes.
Like, they don't have the option of not
People
doing
always
it.
assume that the smaller you are, the harder it is. Yani, I remember during the pandemic, I had so many younger brands or smaller brands that contact us, say, "Oh, you guys must be fine, you know, it's so much easier for you guys." And I'm like, how? We're 300 employees. How is it easier for us than, you know, it's the perception of, if you're smaller and you have the lack of experience, it must be so much harder. It's harder on the experience and what to do. But the bigger you get, the problems grow, because now you're responsible for so many people. You're not just responsible for 2 or 3 or 5.
And the domino effect is bigger.
Exactly. And with the pandemic, it was the first time we got hit in all our markets. And with the revolution and with the devaluation, there was always a market that was sort of helping us. But it was the first time where you have your London shop closed, Dubai closed, Egypt closed, Jordan online.
So you mentioned that you're a company of about 300 people. How do you, obviously you have clear, between the two of you, the two sisters, clear roles in the firm. But how do you come to decisions as a family? Do you consider this, it's still considered a family business. You look at it that way, right? How involved is your mother?
Very involved.
Very involved. Is she very involved in the design, or is she very involved in the trajectory of the firm?
No, both. The trajectory of the firm, for sure, she's very involved in. And she's very involved in design, and she's a workaholic. So she's the kind of person that has her, not just her plate full, but sort of overflowing
And she needs about 4 lifetimes.
Our issue is always how to hold her back, because it just becomes too much on all of us. We were just recently having a conversation about that. What we've been through, I mean, we've been through different phases as a company and as a family, but the latest we've done, which I think has helped us very much, is we've gone through a governance exercise that sort of very clearly says who does what and where. And one of the things we've added that has helped us a lot is an advisory board. So even though we're a family business and we're privately owned, we have a board
to help you with
to help us with that sort of, because sometimes the three of us might not agree.
Yes.
I'm talking about the big decisions.
Of course.
So day to day, it's very clear who does what.
Of course.
But with the bigger decisions, and I think so far we always reach a consensus because we're all in agreement about our board in terms of trusting them, and they're very diverse in terms of expertise, but all very trustworthy.
And we're all in agreement of our vision.
Our vision.
None of us want to say, oh, we want to be this commercial brand that, you know, or like we all agree on where we need to go. How, but sometimes there's a little bit of difference. Oh,
It's the how that we sometimes sort of disagree about, and that's where the board comes in and becomes very helpful. And I think through conversations we end up agreeing. You know what I mean about the direction.
Amina, how do you work? So is your mother still designing, or are you now the primary designer?
My mother is still chief designer, so she's still the boss.
And she always will be.
She always will be, but she's responsible actually for about 20% of the collections or 20% of the pieces. But she still has to approve everything that I design. Our relationship dynamics have shifted drastically over the years.
Tell me about that.
First 3 years, I wasn't allowed to open my mouth. Just put it in a very nice, very diplomatic way.
That's hilarious. So you would just implement what she would tell you?
I would just observe.
Ah, I see. So even one step before that.
I wasn't allowed to have an opinion.
Okay.
Even though I had a degree.
But you know, Amina, that's your apprenticeship. Right?
لا we took it يعني. I think I've cried in the bathroom 1,000 times, but it doesn't matter.
I'm sure.
It got me to where I was.
I'm sure.
And then in 2008, she allowed me to design our first collection, my first collection. And from then on, but we started actually getting along in terms of work around 2009, 2010, which is about 4 or 5 years after I joined the company. And it's like we came up with this new product because I had just spent 6 years in Europe and I was obsessed with everything modern and contemporary that didn't make any sense to my mother. And my mother would throw all this heritage and culture at me, which to me at the time felt very démodé and this is so 2000 and late kind of attitude. But 4 or 5 years into conversation, she started obsessing about contemporary jewelry, and I started obsessing about everything old.
So you met in the middle.
Exactly. So we met in the middle, and we produced this entire new product that had this mix of bridging those two things, the contemporary jewelry with heritage and culture.
That must have been very exciting for you and for her because you meet each other.
And it's weird because it took some time for our clients to come around. So the first time we actually did that, everyone was like, oh, what happened to Azza Fahmy? It must be the influence of the new daughter. You know, it was that kind of, you know, and then other people were like, yeah, but it's good. It's a fresh eye. It's new. It's, you know, but.
I think I remember this period because you brought in a lot of semi-precious stones and.
It was just a lot of different shapes, very modern shapes. It wasn't your typical Azza Fahmy look. But I think one of the very nice moments for me with my mother was in 2011, which is 6 years after I joined, when she looked at me and she said, finally a decent design.
That's so funny. So that was a backhanded compliment. But that's interesting because 6 years
is a lot.
It's a long time to wait.
And I did 5.5 years in Europe with one of the best jewelry design degrees in the world.
What did you answer her?
Like I said, I didn't know whether to be very happy and over the moon and feel very offended.
That's funny.
So she's like, finally a decent design. And then she looked at me and she said, you know what? You're not bad.
That's the highest compliment.
Mind you, my mother is someone that is very critical. She's a perfectionist. But even so she finishes a collection, and as soon as we launch it into the store, she hates it. Yeah. She's like, this is not good. I should have done this, and I should have. And one of our challenges in terms of management is knowing when to stop her, because she can go on perfecting it.
And who does she listen to in those situations?
We have a structure. We have a manager for the design office to put her on a calendar to say, I'm sorry, it's going into sampling. That's it. It's perfect. We all think it's okay. You'll never think it's good enough.
But it's really interesting that the company has evolved into a very structured entity. It's not about her. It's not just her sitting there with a pad and a paper designing or using her hands to build. It's become it's become a
And I don't
large-
think we would have reached where we are, Ya Malak, if it was... Because I think that's one of the most challenging things about
an
artists
artist.
and designers.
Because you said she's a perfectionist, and the fact that she allowed other people to come in and say, "La, it's enough."
Come on, it's vision and a lot of... I'm not sure if the word is maturity or she is a visionary in that sense. Because you see a lot of amazingly talented business artists and designers that never make it, not because their designs are not good, but because they
lack
didn't
that
allow the
area.
complementing on the business sense.
Exactly. Or other people's input.
Exactly.
So what's coming next for you as individuals and you as a company? Amina, let's start with you.
I always struggle with these questions because we're doing so many things. Yeah, I feel like it's...
So we've been talking a lot about the company in terms of, you've all thought of it in terms of the end product or the end, I see this. What do you see as coming next?
I think for me now, it's branching out of jewelry because we've mastered jewelry and we've mastered craftsmanship and design, that I feel like I want to pour that into other products.
Such as what?
So much, whether it's bags, whether it's cutlery, it's homeware, it's once you know proportions and you know motifs and you know history and you know everything, then it automatically just takes you.
And I think, like Amina was saying, we've built this brand that has such a strong DNA that now we feel it's time to take it into other sort of product ranges, but also very much so geographical expansion. Because I think we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to our international presence. So it's sort of what's next in terms of international expansion.
Kaman, I remember, Fatma, that a few years ago, maybe not even that long ago, you did an executive MBA with a focus on luxury brands. And in my perception, I don't know if it's just my own perception or if it was a conscious brand decision, but there seemed to be a point, I would say maybe 10, 12 years ago, where the Azza Fahmy brand leaped into a slightly different category. Did that happen consciously, or was it just a natural progression?
I'd say both, Malak. I'd say both. I think it was how we felt the brand that's sort of the natural progression of it, but then we did it consciously. Mm-hmm. After that realization, we're like, no, this needs to happen. Mm-hmm. We need to focus on repositioning. We need to focus on this sort of that trajectory.
And was that based on wanting to be international? The two were
very much so. Because when you start thinking of the international market, you realize that certain things don't work and other things you need to work on. And so that was the focus. And going back to the masters, because I've never studied what I do, I sort of needed that. First of all, I thought I needed the knowledge. And so it was an amazing experience because it's the first master's that's focused on the luxury market. And it was a joint program between Bocconi and ESSEC, which are both very big schools in the luxury industry. And so for me, it was a fantastic opportunity. It's an executive program. I can do it while I'm working. But what I realized when I started doing it is a lot of the things we studied is stuff I know, it's stuff we do naturally. But hearing it at that level.
So it was a confirmation in a way.
A lot of it was confirmations. And a lot of it was confirmations for sort of what we do in terms of sort of driven by our gut,
yes.
Just common sense.
Yes.
But we need that because I think part of our challenges being in Egypt is the ecosystem doesn't exist, the industry doesn't exist. So you're sort of operating in a vacuum.
You are, but you're also creating norms.
Of course, and things are changing.
Yeah.
But when you are sort of paving the way, it's very hard of you, and it's very expensive.
Yes.
Because a lot of things you can't do here because what you want to do at an international level is wasn't available.
And there's no precedent.
At all.
Yeah.
So you're sort of just running. And that's part of why our vision was, and my mother's vision was to develop the school and develop the vocational center. And because she was like, first of all, if you want to study jewelry, like when she wanted to study it, or Amina, they had to go to the UK. How many people can go to Europe to study?
It's not affordable for everyone.
It's not doable.
Of course.
For most people.
Of course.
And even for us as a business, how do I hire new designers? I can't hire from Egypt. I need to hire from Europe if I want to grow the department. So it was for us, okay, so we need to have a design school. We need to have a design school in the region. You don't have it in the region, not just Egypt.
You need to formalize the industry.
Exactly.
You need to create
And create a hub.
And then those designers, they can't operate in a vacuum. They need craftsmen. So we've developed our vocational training school that develops craftsmen. Because again, you designers sort of graduate and then they don't have many people that can work because the crafts are dying and people are not teaching it anymore. So that was another angle. I've recently, we've established the Egyptian Fashion and Design Council. And our vision as a council...
That's a new thing?
It's a new thing. We've established it before COVID, but then with COVID we couldn't do much. And the idea is we were 5 people that are sort of leaders in the design and fashion industry that came together and said, okay, we've all suffered individually. We've all paved the way, each of us on our own, but we've made it. But things should not be that hard. We need to create the industry, because if you create the industry and you create the ecosystem, it becomes easier for everyone.
Of course. And norms are there and standards are set.
And there's this thing actually where we took it because we've always sort of struggled with this, which you call the challenge of country of origin. If you think tech, you think Silicon Valley. If you think cars, you think Germany. If I tell you, this is a car from Tunisia, we're like, what, And luxury and jewelry and design is Italy and France, and has been for the last 500 years.
Yeah.
So how do you create that ecosystem that comes into, and in the region it's Lebanon, it's not Egypt.
Yeah.
We need that ecosystem because it supports all of us.
When we went to the UK in 2003 and started knocking on doors, no one would see us. Forget about checking your work. No one would see us. We're from Egypt. Who comes from Egypt?
So how did you change that?
Persistence.
Just kept knocking.
And showing them the product.
And showing them the product, and then
Collaboration.
Yeah. Our first collaboration with Julian McDonald, and it was.
And he's edgy, and he's
back then Julian was the golden boy of sort of UK designers.
Absolutely.
And so you're collaborating with Julian, that must mean you're good. But it was constant. I remember meetings where I left where people would say, even after seeing the product, we love the product, but we can't have a brand from Egypt. I left meeting where people would say, well, I thought I'd get veiled women who don't know how to speak English. Like the misconceptions are shocking.
Yeah,
and these are educated people in the heart of London.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now a lot of younger brands, when they go and they say, we did this and we met up with this department store, and there's a part of me that always wants to say, You're welcome. You're welcome.
Because you opened the doors for a lot of younger brands.
It's like Fatma's saying, it's not just, how you throw one pebble and it's like the first one is so hard and then all of a sudden there's a ripple effect and it just grows very naturally and you create that ecosystem, and exactly what Lebanon did. I'm sure Elisab, when he knocked on doors in Paris, it must have been, without knowing it must have been extremely difficult for him. Yeah. He was a designer from Beirut who was trying to make it in one of the most important cities for fashion in the world. And now, whenever you say fashion region, Lebanon pops in. And when you say Lebanese designer, there's this association of, they must be amazing. And now there are hundreds and hundreds of, but I'm sure it's because he started that. He started that movement.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What I Did Next, brought to you by ANT Media with me, Malak Fuad, and with Chirag Desai co-producing. Please remember to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for news about the show. Just search for What I Did Next. Our next episode will be in 2 weeks' time, and we hope you can join us then.